All right, today we are diving into a really fascinating and honestly pretty unconventional academic proposal. It's all about resolving a centuries old aspiration for Sikh sovereignty, and it looks to a very, very unexpected place for the solution.
And it all starts with this question. Could a tiny, walled-off city, right in the middle of Rome, somehow hold the key to peace for millions of people in Punjab? I know, it sounds pretty out there, but that's exactly what this research paper suggests. So, let's get into it.
Okay, first things first. To really get what this proposal is all about, we need to understand the history behind it. This isn't just about politics, it's about an identity that's been forged over hundreds of years.
At the very heart of this is a crucial concept, Qawm. Now, it often gets translated as nation, but it's so much deeper than that. Think of it as the idea of a distinct people, a community with a right to both religious and political freedom. It's a complete identity, and this is the core of that long-held aspiration. And right at the center of that identity is the Akal Takht. This is the supreme seat of religious authority in Sikhism, and it's located inside the famous Golden Temple complex. Now, you're going to want to remember this place because it is the absolute focal point, geographically and spiritually, of this entire proposal. So, the modern political movement for this Qawm didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The research paper we're looking at traces its evolution. It really got going in the late 1800s with movements to restore Sikh heritage. Then in 1920, the Akali Dal political party was formed. But the real turning point? That came in 1978, with a resolution that officially declared Sikhs a Qawm. This really set the stage for future conflict, which tragically culminated in the 1984 military operation known as Blue Star. That event left incredibly deep wounds and only intensified calls for a separate homeland.
So with all that history as a backdrop, the author of this paper, Tennyson Samrash, asks a pretty interesting question. What if the goal isn't a completely separate country? What if there's another way to do this? And that brings us to, well, a very unlikely source of inspiration.
So here it is. This is the big idea. The paper lays out a plan to create a tiny, sovereign religious city-state for Sikhs modeled directly on Vatican City. The whole point is to satisfy the religious and identity aspects of the Qawm without having to go through a full political secession from India. Now, for this idea to even make sense, right, we've got to look at the precedent. I mean, how on earth does the Vatican actually work as a country inside of another country?
It all goes back to one key year, 1929. This is when the modern Vatican City state, as we know it, was officially born.
What happened was a formal agreement called the Lateran Treaty was signed. It was between the Italian government, which was led by Mussolini at the time, and the Holy See. And this treaty literally carved out a piece of Rome and recognized it as a completely independent, sovereign nation. So how does this all work in practice? Well, for starters, the Vatican is incredibly small. We're talking just 108 acres. The Pope plays two roles. He's the spiritual leader for Catholics all over the world, but he's also the political head of state of this tiny territory. And here's the crucial part. The Vatican stays officially neutral in any international conflicts, and its foreign policy and defense, that's all handled by the country surrounding it, Italy. That's the blueprint. Okay, so let's take that Vatican model and see how it could translate into a blueprint for what the author calls a Khalsa state. How would this actually look in Punjab? Okay, this is probably the most important distinction to make. The proposal is not arguing for a new Sikh homeland that would break away from India. No. Instead, it's arguing for a new holy land, a spiritual enclave that cleanly separates religious authority from the secular government of the wider state of Punjab. The paper actually lays out a super specific 6-point plan for this. Step 1, you'd petition the Indian government to create this new state centered around the Golden Temple. Step 2, its leader, the chief guru, would act just like the Pope, the political head of the state and the spiritual leader for Sikhs everywhere. Step 3, and this is so important, the rest of Punjab would just keep on being a secular state within India. Step 4, just like the Vatican with Italy, this Khalsa state would hand over its foreign policy and defense to India. Step 5 would be to formally declare the Akal Takht area as the land of the pure. And finally, Step 6, the entire plan really hinges on an appeal to the goodwill of the Indian government to let it happen. This chart really lays it all out, side by side, so you can see how these two systems could coexist. On one side, you'd have the Khalsa state, run like a religious monarchy, with its power limited just to the Golden Temple complex, led by the chief guru. And on the other side, you have the state of Punjab, which would stay a secular democracy,
covering the whole region and led by an elected chief minister. The key thing they both have in common: foreign policy for both would be handled by the central Indian government.
So what's the big argument here? What's the end game? What does the author think this whole Holy Land, not homeland approach would actually accomplish for everyone involved?
The author, Tennyson Samraj, sums up his whole argument with this quote, and it's a powerful one. A spiritual state within the confines of a secular state is in the best interest of both. That really gets to the very heart of the compromise he's proposing. So the ultimate takeaway is that this model is being presented as a kind of win-win. The thinking is it could fulfill the deep-seated religious and identity needs of the Sikh Qawm without ever threatening the sovereignty of India. But more than that, the author argues it would actually strengthen Indian secularism by creating this clear physical separation between religious authority and state power. And that kind of leaves us with one final big question. This paper is focused on one very specific long-running conflict, but it makes you wonder, could creative, out-of-the-box political models, just like this one, a state within a state, offer a new path forward for other religious and nationalist conflicts all around the globe? It's definitely something to think about.